Hi, welcome to this episode of Coffee and Conversation by the DEI Committee of the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons. This is our third episode. For our first two episodes, be sure to visit the ASCRS YouTube channel to see it. Our topic for this episode is the scarcity of Black men in medicine. Coffee and Conversation is an educational program designed to address physician and patient-centered experiences related to diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and justice through casual but expert conversation between surgeons. These conversations will be available for viewing to anyone with access to the ACRS YouTube channel. This programming will be brought to you every quarter, so be on the lookout. Now, let me introduce our amazing moderator and our past presidents of the American Society of Colon and Rectal Surgeons, whom I feel privileged to share this platform with, Dr. Ann Lowry. Ann?
Thank you very much. I would return that. I feel privileged to share the platform with the two of you. Ever since I saw the Black Men in White Coats Rise Up documentary, I've been eager to participate in any conversation. So first, I'd like to introduce our two conversationalists. One is Dr. Dale Okorodudu, who is a pulmonary and critical care physician. His undergraduate medical education was at the University of Missouri. He did internal medicine at Duke, and then pulmonary and critical care at UT Southwestern. And his clinical practice is currently at the Dallas VA Medical Center. He is passionate about addressing healthcare disparities, particularly through increasing the diversity in the medical workforce. And you will see a theme among these two people in that area. He has started several organizations, Diverse Medicine Inc. and Black Men in White Coats. There, as what I could find, he's the author of several books. He's done a number of podcasts and short documentary series, and he says he enjoys time with his family and church family. I don't really know how he has that time, but welcome.
Thank you.
And the second person in the conversation you just briefly seen is Dr. Robert Amajoyi, who is a colorectal surgeon in Kansas City. And he did his medical degree at the University of Missouri, surgery at Nassau University, and his fellowship at St. Vincent's Hospital. He's an assistant professor of surgery at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, and practices at St. Luke's Hospital. It looks like it's several of them. He does the breadth of colorectal surgery with a focus maybe on MIS and serving underserved communities. He's also the chair of the U.S. section of colorectal surgery of the International College of Surgeons. And again, he is passionate about healthcare disparities, particularly through addressing them by increasing the diversity in the medical workforce. He started a couple of organizations, Unstuck Lifestyle Coaching and Elite Mentoring, to help the underrepresented members of our workforce increase. So welcome, and I'm excited to have this conversation. Perhaps we should start by trying to understand the magnitude of the problem. Dr. Dale, I'll start with you. Could you just share some of the data?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you guys for allowing me to join you on this platform. It's very honored and privileged. And my good friend, Robert, I appreciate all the support you've been for Black Men in White Coats over the years and thinking to allow me to come on this platform. So thank the both of you very much. So it's a huge problem. Obviously, it's a huge problem big enough for us to make a movie around it. And probably a few key data points to know, and I'll give you just one number really, but the biggest thing to know is not a data point. The biggest thing to know is numbers went down, right? That's why all this thing started. So when I first saw the report in 2013, I know we'll get into that, but the numbers were going down. So even though it's not a specific data point, just the backwardsness of it was the biggest thing. And where we are today, you know, roughly where we've been for a long time, really, roughly about 3% of all physicians in the United States. Actually, I haven't gone to medical school. 3% of medical school matriculants are Black men, roughly, right? So 3% is kind of that number. It's usually between 2 and 3. We've inched our way slowly to be right at 3% for Black men. When you're talking about Blacks in general, you're talking 9 to 10% matriculants in medical school. So out of that 9 to 10%, 3% of them are Black men. And when you take a second to compare this to the United States population, about, you know, between 13 and 14% Blacks overall in general. First of all, we're not reaching our equal representation in medical school. But second of all, what makes that even worse is when you account for the health disparities, there's a bigger gap that we have to cover. So even reaching our percentages might not even be enough, really.
So how do you think we got here?
A lot of ways. So we got here, you know, quite a bit of ways. One thing I would say, which I don't like saying this, I'm not going to use the word neglect, but one thing I would say is, you know, for whatever reason, we kind of just let it fly under the radar. Nobody actually stopped to pay attention to it. You know, nobody stopped to pay attention to it. So for a while, we thought, hey, the numbers are looking better. They're increasing. But what was actually happening is the number of Black women were increasing. The number of Black men were not. The Black women were increasing enough to make it look like everybody else was increasing. And in the documentary, for those of you who have seen it, you know, Dr. Mark Neve tells the story. What happened was he was asked to go give a talk at Howard. And when he went to give the talk, he wanted to de-aggregate this data. He wanted to look at Black men separate from Black women. And this is like, you know, 2011, 12, 13, that time span. And when he actually finally broke down that data between Black men and women, that's when it was alarming. Like, wow, this has been going on. Nobody took the time all those years to break the data down and publish it until Mark Neve. So that's one thing. Second thing, obviously, a lot of things, but another second thing would just be simply the fact that what's portrayed in society and media for young Black men, right? For young Black men, we are heavily pushed into entertainments, right? Including music and athletics, right? And we're not pushed enough towards academics. It's one of those things where if you're being pushed towards academics, you're in danger of being teased at school. You're in danger of not fitting the mold that society has created for you. If you're not fitting in that mold society has created for you, you can become an outcast, right? So actually a large part of my messaging nowadays, like this past weekend, I did a speaking deal. A large part of the messaging was, hey, it's okay to be different. It's actually good to be different. So we've got to teach our youth that, hey, you know, being different and smart that's a way to go. It's not just all sports, entertainment, things of that sort.
Dr. Rob, do you have anything you want to add to that about how we got here?
No, I think he nailed it, essentially. And I do think that the only person that is in charge of really what you become is you. But unfortunately, when you're a kid, you basically can be molded by the society. As an adult, you shouldn't be molded by the society, but as a kid, it can be. So whatever the kid is around is what they may become. And what you think about is what you become. So I think he really nailed it. And thanks for that comment, Dr. Dev.
So you referenced healthcare disparities. Could we talk a little bit about healthcare disparities and about health equity? And maybe I'll ask Dr. Rob to start with what those two things are, and are they the same?
Most of us know what health disparities are, but most don't know what healthcare disparities are, because they're two different things, but they're not mutually exclusive. I like the definition by CDC. The CDC identifies health disparities as a preventable differences in the burden of disease, injury, violence, or opportunities to achieve optimal health that are experienced by socially disadvantaged populations. And that's the definition that I found to really be correct. Healthcare disparity, on the other hand, it typically refers to the differences between groups in health insurance coverage, access to a use of care, and the quality of care. The key phrase there is access to use of care. We prefix this conversation by saying that patients do better when they are cared for by people who they can relate to. So one can say that not having representation can be a healthcare disparity. And that is why I think those two definitions are different, but it's good to understand the differences. Not mutually exclusive, but it's good to understand the differences.
So,
And,
oh, sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead.
And you know, folks will say, okay, what is health equity then? I don't know if you had that question for me too, but health equity by definition generally refers to individuals achieving their highest level of health through the elimination of disparities in health and healthcare. Okay, so interesting definition. That's what I call it, and I think that's what I've seen written somewhere in one of the textbooks. But the best definition also comes from the CDC, and the CDC says that the health equity is defines the achievement of health equity as when every person has the opportunity to attain his or her full health potential, and no one is disadvantaged from achieving this potential because of social position or other socially determined circumstances. And I think those nailed the definition pretty well.
So I'd like to ask both of you, but I'll start with Dr. Dale. Can you talk a little bit about the implications of having too few Black men in medicine on both healthcare disparities and health equity?
Yeah, I'll start with that, and then I'll branch out to something that I think is just as important that we often don't think about. So Robert had alluded to this idea that, and studies have shown this, right? Multiple studies have shown things of this sort, that for patients, specifically, I'll talk about Black male patients, or I know it's bad for us to do this in healthcare, evidence-based medicine, but I'm going to expand that a little bit, even beyond Black men. You know, if you're a patient and your physician looks similar to you, you're more likely to follow their advice, right? So, the big study that kind of broke all this was a study that came out. Again, this has probably been like 4 years now, where it was a study on Black male patients. Essentially, what they found was when Black male patients had Black clinicians, didn't have to be Black men, but just Black clinicians in general, they're more likely to follow their preventative care recommendations, things like, getting your basic labs checked, cholesterol, shots, flu shots, things of that sort. They're more likely to actually take those recommendations from the doctor. And while that sounds small, that's a huge thing. That's a really huge thing when you're talking about in the world of primary care. If you can get individuals to start being active, engaged with their own primary health care, that stops a lot of things that come down the pipeline. And that's what that study showed us. So just that one bit of information is a game changer for healthcare society. And when you talk about healthcare, you're talking about, the GDP, things of that sort that impact beyond the field of medicine, right? That's one thing. That's the obvious thing. The other thing I would say that I think is just as important is the fact that when you have more doctors from underrepresented backgrounds, what this allows subconsciously in society for other people who might not look like us, Robert and I, for example, to see us doing things that society deems as excellent, right? They see us in a different lights than they do when they put on the television and see whatever the news is showing that particular evening, right? It allows for people to see, quote unquote, what people call Black excellence. And when you see Black excellence, that shifts the way we're viewed in society overall. So that makes it better for the next generation. Not only does it make it better for the next generation, people who look like me, just makes it better for everybody's interactions. Now maybe somebody who doesn't look like me is more comfortable talking to me, and maybe I can benefit their life in a different way than it would have been. So what it does is it brings more, quote unquote, good examples into society for everybody else to see. I think that's a huge part, and that changes the narrative overall, right? So the narrative no longer is it's not only sports, hip hop, right? It's not only that stuff anymore. When you start seeing these professional degree individuals, it adds that component to society.
Dr. Rob, what you have thoughts about that? Additional thoughts?
Oh yeah, well, definitely well said, Dr. Dale. So the way I look at it from a philosophical standpoint, I say we need to take advantage of all the folks the universe has provided to us. The universe has provided everybody to us for free, okay? Everyone is here for a reason. The universe will not be complete without each one of us here. We do better as a society when everybody's contributing. Anyone who has a working brain and no defects can contribute greatly. And affording everyone an opportunity to contribute is a good thing, right? There are really only two positions to have. Either you're producing or you are draining the system. So it should behoove us to have everyone contribute at a high level. That makes a lot of sense to me. One of my mentors, a great philosopher, Jordan Peterson, talks about the purposeless man. And the purposeless man is a man that is prone to do non-productive things, right? Sometimes does destructive things, and a higher calling gives you an opportunity to do high calling things. And then he said something that is very impressive to me. He said, purpose is analgesic. So someone with no purpose is in pain, right? If you think about that. Earl Nightingale then said that when you have nothing to do, you are living a vacuous life. And that is a life that can be parasitic. And so there's no excitement in that kind of life. There is no hope in that kind of life. You become what you think about all day long. The sum totals of your thoughts over the years is who you are today. And when people are not getting an opportunity, when people cannot reach their full potential, then all kinds of badness happen. Drugs, alcohol dependency, disability, mental health problems, all of those things are the exact result of having nothing to do. Folks are now left with the government to take care of them. The budget suffers. We're shooting ourselves in the foot. He mentions things about GDP, and I'll talk about that down the road. Have you ever heard of Medicare cuts? When people have nothing to do, they have no job, they have no money. Now they're going to go to ER for care. When we get Medicare cuts, we'll worry about what's going on. So we are actually, if the whole society is not healthy, if part of the society is not healthy, then the whole society is not healthy. If you look at a society as a body, if your leg is not healthy, you're not healthy. So I was reading this report from the Kellogg Foundation titled "The Business Case for Racial Equity and a Strategy for Growth." In that report, Dr. Larry, it stated that the United States economy could be $8 trillion larger by 2050 if the country eliminated disparities in health, education, incarceration, and employment. The gains would be equivalent to a continuous boost in GDP growth of 0.5% per year, increasing the competitiveness of the country for decades to come. So one of the key findings from that report is that, Dr. Dale, is that there is potential economic gain of $135 billion per year if disparities in health are eliminated, including $93 billion in excess medical care costs and $42 billion in untapped productivity. So we all know that the population is becoming diverse, right? There's no question about that. People of color are projected to account for over half the population by 2050. As of 2020, people of color was just listed as 39% of the population. In 2050, the projection is 52%. And when I talk about people of color, we talk about people described as Black, Hispanics, Asians, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, American Indians, and Alaska Natives. So, so we have to address disparities. There's no question. I say scarcity of Black men in medicine is a healthcare disparity. Healthcare disparity also deprives our nation and the scientific and medical community the full breadth of talent, expertise, and perspectives needed to best address racial and ethnic healthcare disparities. I think that's what I would say about all that.
It's a great argument for both from the perspective of patients, from the perspective of the society at large, in terms of contributions and how people are viewed, and from a financial GDP kind of benefit, which is great. And I am sure there are even more things to talk about. I know that you have both been very involved in trying to recruit more Black men into the medical workforce. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about a lot of it, sort of a little bit about what you've done, a little bit about where you think that needs to start. You know, is it enough to mentor the men who get into medical school, or do we have to start sooner? And so again, I'll start maybe with Dr. Dale about what you've been doing and how you see that effort and its importance.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, we've done a few things. I'll just kind of focus on Black men and white coats as it's our biggest effort around this topic. So, Black men and white coats, we started this 10 years ago now, and it was in response to Dr. Mark McVeigh's finding that I mentioned earlier. And it started off really is just trying to change the narrative via media. So we're posting videos, social media. Nowadays, if you go on Instagram or any of the social media platforms, you'll see a lot of diversity, images, figures, things on social media around the field of medicine. So a lot of Black doctors posting things of that sort. That didn't exist when we started all this, right? So when we started this 10 years ago, that was the idea. Our idea was to get social media on fire with imagery, things of this sort. That's why we started it we took advantage of social media as a vehicle to demonstrate the Black man in a white coat in a positive light, right? So we started really with that focus, and what ended up happening was a lot of things happened, but one individual saw our videos, reached out to us and said, hey, we'd love to do a Black Men and White Coats Youth Summit. And I wanted to do that, but I never had the resources. So we partnered with the hospital and we did our first Black Men and White Coats Youth Summit. And long story short, now we do a whole bunch of these summits across the country, right? So that's one of our biggest endeavors. We have these Black Men and White Coats Youth Summits. We bring communities together. Kids, we started 8 years old. You mentioned how early it is to start. We think it's important to start as young as they can sit down and listen to you, right? And for our programming in the household and the family should start before that, I believe. But for our programming, we start at 8 years old so we can keep their attention. We bring them together. We just have a great day of full of events. And after that, we don't want them just to go back out into society. So what we do is we offer another program. We have something called Pre-Med Mondays. Every Monday for the past several years, we have a mentoring program for pre-meds where they can come in and to get mentorship from our team and things of that sort. So we don't just go out there into the communities to grab them. Once we grab them, we plug them into our system to make sure they have that guidance moving forward. So that by and large is our biggest effort that we do to contribute to eradicating this crisis of lack of Black men in the field of medicine.
So can you talk a little bit more about what happens at these youth summits and what you're doing to bridge that gap between 8 to 10 years old and medical school, or what you think should be done to bridge that gap?
Yeah, sure. So the youth summits are really cool. A lot of stuff happens. So and we break it down into different groups. So our youth summits, again, starts off with 8 years old. So the little kids do a lot of stuff together. The little bit older kids, we get high school, college, post-bac. They do a lot of stuff together. And then we have programming for adults too. You mentioned I'm an author. One of my books on my left shoulder here, How to Raise a Doctor. So that's geared towards parents, for example. So every youth summit we do is required to have a How to Raise a Doctor panel. So we feel as though it's very important to make sure we're educating the parents so the parents can then equip their own children. So those are kind of the age breakdown of how we do things, and do a lot of activities. I mean, we try to get it as hands-on as possible, and we've seen it all, right? So, CPR, physical exam, intubation, baby, deliveries, virtual reality. I mean, these summits, they have any and everything you can imagine that we can offer kids to get their hands on, so that they're not just sitting there in a classroom listening, but they're actually engaged and they're doing the same stuff that we do in the hospitals. And they get an opportunity to just say, hey, this throwing a football, that's fun, but man, delivering a baby is pretty fun too, So to do stuff like that. And bridging that gap. So that the first thing is we get them excited, right? So the summits are meant to get them excited and exposed. We're all about excited, exposed, empowered, right? So we want to get them excited first and exposed to the field of medicine. And then after that, to bridge that gap release, but really it's that Pre-Med Mondays program, right? We get them plugged in with us and they get mentorship. Every Monday they have the opportunity to hop on a Zoom meeting like this with our team. And we break into small groups, ask questions, talk things through. And that Pre-Med Mondays is based on another book I wrote called Pre-Med Mondays. And we use that as our curriculum over 52 weeks. And we're just bridging that gap via that mechanism, that vehicle.
So the one thing you didn't mention that I think is worth the audience hearing is you have also written these doctor-to-doctor books, or doc-to-doc books, which the ones I've read, I think, are great ways to introduce kids to medicine. You want to talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, sure. So after this, I'm actually going to a school to read the kids. But so this is the first one I read, Dr. Doc, Tony and Jace Learn About the Heart. And really what, where these books came from is I was trying to find a book for my kids, my boys, because I wanted them to read something, that's not just sports things, that sort of, I was trying to find something for them to read with people that look like them. I couldn't find it. So I said, well, if I can't find it, I'll just write. I'd already written some books before that. I said, I'll just write it. So then I wrote the first one and people just loved it. And I said, well, okay, let me just turn it into a series. So I have 7 Dr. Doc books now. I have more written. I just haven't taken the time to publish. A big shift of my focus now is I teach doctors how to publish and write and speak now. So it doesn't take it up my time. I haven't got back myself to writing the next books, but the plan there is to really have an extensive library for kids from URM backgrounds to be able to open up a book and see people, see people that look like them in the book in a fun and entertaining way for them to learn about sciences and just get exposed to healthcare overall.
So I'll switch to Dr. Rob. I know you've also been very engaged in trying to increase the diversity. You want to tell us a little bit about your efforts and why you think it's important. And then I'm going to go back to both of you about making the film. So.
Yeah, to piggyback on Dr. Dale's point, I mean, I really, when I first met Dr. Dale, I was extremely impressed because he just literally was doing what everybody wants to do. Like, one thing is wishing it, the other is doing it, right? So he's been doing it since 2013. I don't even know where I was then. And so that's a lot of work. And he recognized that you really have to go into the community to get started, go to the family first. There's several ways to obviously get the pipelines right in order to get this patient, this case to start thinking about medicine and also be able to get into medicine. There is a report called the Missing Persons, Minorities in Health Professions, written a few years ago. Dr. Sullivan, the former U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, was commissioned by W.K. Kellogg Foundation and Duke University to make the policy recommendations on how to bring about systemic change that will address the scarcity of minorities in our health professions. I found it to be very, very informative, and we're going to share that article in the chat for everybody who wants to look at it later. Nonetheless, I think the chapter 4 of that report talks about the multiple obstructions found in the key segments of the pipeline to getting minorities to the health profession. The obstructions were found in the primary and secondary education levels, like K through 12, post-secondary education levels, which is like college years, and then the health profession education, which is like residencies and fellowships. Dr. Sullivan talked about how to support the pipeline programs. I am a product of the pipeline program. I did the MMAP, which is Minority Medical Education Program, back in 2008 or so in Birmingham, Alabama. So the one thing that he mentioned in that report also that really kind of resonated with me is that he said that I think that report alluded to how 50% of medical students have decided to become physicians by junior high level. So it is important to provide a professional exposure programs early and the standardized testing support necessary to matriculate in medical school and being successful once you get there. And that is what we are trying to do, is go back to the beginning. I decided I wanted to be a doctor at the age of 9. All I know is I saw doctors. I grew up in Nigeria. I saw doctors wear white coats. They all look like me. So I was like, okay, they're taking care of people. They're doing noble things. I just want to be like them. So I decided when I was 9. So it really takes going back to the very beginning, starting when they're young, to catch them, since over 50% of them already decided before junior high. So that is what we're actually trying to do, target. So some of our pipelines or some of the programs we do have some of the foundations. I have the David Luke Foundation, which basically goes into the inner city, talks to high school students and try to get them to start thinking about medicine, how to become a complete person, all of that. Try to catch them when they're very young, because that's when it starts. Dr. Larry, when did you decide you want to be a doctor?
I was pretty young. I don't know if I was maybe 8 or 9.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. So all of the people that I've spoken to, Dr. Dale, what about you?
Mine's funny. It's like I tell people I always knew I was going to be a doctor, but I don't think I really decided I wanted to be a doctor until college, because I wanted to be a basketball player like everybody else. But as a kid, when if it wasn't basketball, if I was acting out something, it was medicine, right? It was the Cosby Show, right? I knew I was going to be a doctor. That when I thought about the future, that's what I envisioned myself if it wasn't basketball.
So yeah, so what I've done, even my day in the Long Island when I used to live in New York, I give a ton of talks to the medical schools, middle schools. While I was wearing my white coats. In Kansas City, I give talks to, in my spare time, to high schools, and through the Devin Look Foundation, which focuses on teaching kids how to think and how to become creative, how to value human life, how to bounce back from adversity, how to become assets to the society. I mean, how to improve their social and emotional intelligence. And in part, we also teach them how to pursue career in medicine. I just want that 7-year-old or 8-year-old or 9-year-old to get to know what they want to be in life, and early on, just like Dr. Dale and Dr. Larry and I did. So I think one of the take-home messages is to mentor whoever you see when they're young. Try to get them to start thinking. It's never too early to start thinking about what you want to be in life, because focus is the number one thing that's required for success. Pick one thing and focus on it. That's how you become an expert in it.
So there was a question in the Q&A that this might be the good time to ask. Because I think you've addressed it partially, but just want to offer you both an opportunity. The question was, what specific techniques and would you offer to change the messaging or relative to sports and entertainment for the Black communities to these other areas of possible excellence? And I know we've talked about the youth summits and the books, but are there other things that you would offer both either to parents or to colleagues in medicine to help change that messaging?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing I would say is we also need to be careful not to deter people from sports, because something that's the message I would say is not this or this, it's this and this. We're heavy basketball fans, so all of a sudden we travel far country, we're heavy basketball, but you better believe he has all A's too, so not this or this. Hey, son, you can be the best athlete you can be, but you better be the best, in academics as well, right? So it's this and this. So that's the message we preach to people, right? So we're not trying to take away sports by any means. Sports, there's things you learn in sports that you cannot learn sitting in the classroom, right? And arguably more valuable things too. So the important thing is, and I make sure I drive this home, because I think in the past I didn't do as good of a job. So I'm making sure I drive this point home is even if it's not sports, whatever type of social activity your kid's in that's not sitting in the classroom chair, that's as important, I believe, right? So it's this and this, and really, I think it's just what we're doing. I can't think of necessarily better ways to do it other than really trying to get more respectable people, like Robert, who are going into the communities, into the middle school, and showing the kids that, right? Because the kids see the basketball players at school. They see their sports coaches at school every day, right? But they don't see doctors at school every day. So I think the technique needs to be, we have to let the kids see us. And obviously, doctors, you're not gonna have a doctor in your classroom every single day. But if we can create programs to get out there. One thing I was saying when COVID was rampant, and maybe on the tail end when we actually had time to get out the hospitals to do stuff. Well, I was saying, hey, this is the perfect time for people to start virtual programs to get into schools, right? Because everybody's up to speed on virtual platform now. We can't be in a million different places, but what you can be is I can see here in front of my laptop and broadcast to 50 schools at one time. So this is the perfect time for us to start getting out there and showing ourselves. So not only are they seeing your coaches every day, but they're starting to see more of us.
Dr. Rob, other things
Yeah.
you'd like to add?
No, I think that those are excellent comments. You know, to dovetail on what Dr. Dale was saying, we simply want our young boys, young Black boys, to know that they can be doctors too, right? It is cool to be a doctor. You know, when we go out there, we put on our white coats, we make a movie. Is to, again, if you can't see, you can be it. It was mentioned in the movie all the time. If you can see it in your mind, you can hold it in your hands. If you're only around certain things and that's all you see, that's what you become. And that's just how it goes. Unless by some magic or some luck, you kind of got out of that stuff for some reason and became something better for yourself. So the same way the star athletes have mastered the science and discipline of basketball, the discipline of football, the science of baseball, I think in the same way our boys can master the science of medicine, the science of surgery, colorectal surgery, neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery, all the other disciplines. Everything is just a science. If you attend to it and pay attention and spend all your time and your mind on it, you'll get it. The same way they master the other sports. I mean, those things require a lot of mental aptitude to master, to become the best. Once you see them, you know, we can't wait to watch them because the discipline, the work they put in the dark when nobody's watching is unbelievable. So with respect to you can't be it if you can't see it. I talked about it in the film. Like I said, I was growing up in Nigeria. All the doctors were Black. I could see myself being a doctor. I just didn't see myself being a surgeon until I saw one of my mentors, Dr. Augustine. Seeing how excellent he was, I told myself I can be a surgeon as well. So if you can't really see it, it was only when I thought I was going to be a cardiologist. I mean, obviously cardiology is a great specialty too, but I honestly did not see myself being a surgeon until I saw Dr. Augustine, who was to today one of my mentors in University of Missouri, Kansas City. So that is why we do the film. You know, you cannot have 99.9% of what's seen out there being entertainment and nothing about being a doctor. And then if you truly believe that if you can't see, it can't be it, and if you can see it, then you can be it, then we have to keep showing this. And that's why, to me, that's why they'll call me and say, hey, can you help produce this film? I was like, you know what? Are you kidding me? I got to be part of this. And that's how it all came about.
Let me add two things. You know, Dr. Rob said something that's really, really important, and I believe that if I can go back and change it, I never say I'll go back and change anything, but if I could redo the film, I would clarify this point. When we talk about you can't see what you can't be, you know, the caveat is exactly what Dr. Rob just said. If you can see it in your mind too, so that counts, right? So I don't want to use that as a mechanism to say, oh, this is why nobody can achieve anything because they've never seen somebody. Well, we have to at least give them the option to be able to create the image in your mind, to be able to dream, right? So that's what I would add to that. The second point that I thought about when you were mentioning the things about the athletes and such just now is, you know, when kids look up to athletes, they see younger people, they see people closer to your age, highly successful, making a lot of money, right? And living the lifestyle of celebrities and things of that sort. So if I'm 12 years old, I can put on TV and see somebody who's 19 in the NBA, and I'm like, oh, I'll be there in 7 years. But if I'm 12 years old and you tell me that I'm going to be 30, 32, 33, 34, when I'm done with this thing called training for medicine, right? That you think about that, you say, hold on, wait, how much time do I have to invest in this? Right. So one thing that I believe we need to do a better job at is not just like Black people, but everybody, is teaching our youth endurance, right? Teaching our youth patience, teaching our youth, you know, you don't need instant gratification. So these are things we need to start putting in their heads from a very, very young age. And honestly, talk about sports. I use sports to teach it to my kids. You know, I talk about, hey, you work out day by day by day. You're not going to see the results tomorrow. And whatever mechanisms we can leverage to teach our youth, say, this is a long-term game you're playing called life. So it doesn't have to be 19, 20. Medicine, as long as you're having fun doing what you're doing every day, is worth it. You know, more than worth it.
100%. I agree with that.
So there are a couple of questions that I'd like to get to now, and then I mean, we could go on forever. I do want to get to some other stuff, but one question is, you've referenced a little bit the issue of the increase in Black physicians has been a little bit more in Black women than in Black men. But somebody is asking, should we also increase the number of Black women in medicine? And do either of you have any thoughts about that?
Sure, yeah, I mean, yeah, 1,000%, we definitely need to increase the number of Black women in medicine. It's, even though, as you mentioned, even though it's higher than Black men, you know, it's still not where it needs to be. And there's data around all this stuff too. And you know, the studies came out a couple of years ago about the infant mortality amongst Black women, things of that sort, right? These are areas that are of critical need just as well. And not just Black women, but Black men, you know, critical need in general. I mean, that's not to say only Black women can be OB docs, right? But you understand what I mean there. Yeah, we definitely need that. One thing that I thought was really important, a lot of people say, hey, Dr. Dale, why is it just Black men and white coats and not black men and women, Black women? Specifically, it was Black men because what the data showed, right? That's why we call it Black men and white coats. And for Black men, sometimes it's almost as if you don't call them out specifically, they won't come, right? They just won't come. So when we say Black men and white coats, you come to our events, it's Black women everywhere still. So the Black women are taking advantage, and something that was said in the documentary, which I hadn't thought about, but I think this is one of the most brilliant things in the documentary. President of Morehouse, Dr. Valerie Montgomery Rice, she says, you know, she's addressing this question as to why Black women are going up, but Black men aren't. And she says, you know, when there was a strong feminist movement, the strong woman movement, she said Black women benefited from that. So Black women took advantage of those resources that were being brought to society, you know, the same as white women, you know, Latino women, you know, Asian, the same as every other race. Black women took advantage of those resources as well. But there was never opportunity for Black men to have anything of that sort. So, you know, piggybacking up your question, when you wonder why is that discrepancy there getting wider, that's part of the reason there. But as it pertains to Black women, also there have been other activities. So part of the reason when I first started is why we didn't focus so much on Black women is because they had other organizations kind of like this specifically for Black women. They're not as strong now anymore, but the Artemis organization by Maisha Taylor. Maisha is the one, she used to be on Disney doing all Doc McStuff and stuff. She's down here, she's in the documentary too. So she had a Black women's organization going on. And then the Right to Be, some people might recognize the Right to Be. They put out a documentary even before we did. It's called Black Women in Medicine, I believe. So you guys go find that documentary, Black Women in Medicine, and that one focuses specifically on Black women in medicine.
Any other comments about that, Dr. Rob?
You know, while we're on that topic, I think Dr. Dale, so what advice would you give that medical school admission committee, the program director listening to this episode about the applicant, the Black applicant that comes in? What would you give them?
Yeah, it's not going to be anything new, right? So obviously the advice I've been given for the past year, the challenge that I made after the film came out. So I had tons of these Q&A sessions at people's schools after they had screening. And what I asked them to do was accept one more, right? So challenge themselves to make one more admission. And the numbers went up a little bit the next year, and then it went up just a tad bit the year after that. That might have been a COVID effect in there too, and also other people's efforts as well. So I'm not taking full credit for it. But the numbers did go up, right? So the documentary came out, and what we did is our advice, or most of our challenge was, hey, there's good applicants in there. You just have to work a little bit harder to find them. So just find one more than you were going to find, except one more. If you're going to accept one more, that's going to make a huge impact across the country ultimately. But what I would really say is, right, and it's nothing new. We talk about the holistic applicant. And not just looking at grades, not just looking at MCAT scores, et cetera, but look at the applicant in totality. And one thing that I love is this idea of distance traveled, right? Distance travel. How far has an applicant come to get to where they're at? So, you know, I'm an associate program director at Southwestern for internal medicine. And when I'm reading these personal statements and going through applications, one of the biggest things, you know, one of the things that gets me most excited is seeing students that have come a long distance. And whether that's a long distance academically, saying yeah, they had a rough start to college and med school and now they're doing well, or whether it's a long distance in life, you know, like, I mean, you guys, I'm sure you guys see, those of you who are in admissions, you know, positions, you know, things, I was homeless, you know, those types of things, right? If you've overcome that, you can figure out medicine, you know, you can
Yeah,
figure this thing out, right?
100%.
You know, medicine has shifted. Medicine back in the days used to be memorize the bones of the body, memorize the ligaments of the body. Medicine now, what it should be, there's still some memorization, but what it should be now more so is, hey, how do you find the answer to this problem that needs to be dealt with, right? Especially with artificial intelligence and the way technology is going. Medicine is completely different. Medicine is becoming more about real problem solving, really being resourceful. And who are the people who can problem solve, and people who are resourceful? It's people who have traveled a long distance. Not necessarily the person that got, you know, 528 on the MCAT, right? So it's great you had a 520 MCAT. That shows me you can study hard. That shows me you're dedicated, you're disciplined. I think that's phenomenal. But we still shouldn't overlook people that have come a long distance. And I don't want to be misunderstood to say I'm saying we should take people that are failing the MCAT. That's not what I'm saying, right? I'm not saying that by any means, but I am saying that we need to look at a lot more than our typical numbers, and we need to actually look at the person and saying, the real question to answer is, how much is this doctor going to care for your patients? How much are they going to contribute back to the medical community overall, right? And how resourceful are they? Those are the questions we want to be answering as we bring people into healthcare.
You can't say it any better, Dr. Dale. And I was hoping to make sure that question is asked. And I was also an associate program director when I was in Long Island for this general surgery program we started. And I've always preached to look at the applicant holistically. Okay, so look at the complete applicant. I've saw us hire people that had the best step one scores, but to be honest with you, it will not let them touch you or your family member with a long foot of pole. Okay, I mean and then we end up letting them go because they just didn't get it. They're not a complete human being. And I think when that applicant comes to the interview, whether it be the medical school or residence or fellowship, I'll say, hey, recognize that this particular applicant, especially if they come from a minority standpoint, has probably had a difficult journey to get there, right? They've probably transcended quite a bit to get there. You know, I'm not saying everybody don't have a mountain to climb. Everybody have a mountain to climb. But what you do know that these people are not circling the foothills, right? They're climbing the mountains, and that individual probably has qualities to do well that are probably second to none because of the amount of privation and amount of mountains they've had to climb to get there. So some of the qualities like great emotional intelligence, persistence, resilience, strong will, is probably what that person possesses that would advance your institution further than you will ever emerge in. So that is why it's good to don't be lazy. Take the time and take a look at these applicants, especially if they're Black or minority. And you have to remember the minority can be a young girl from the corner of Mississippi with no family members ever in their history of their generation ever went to medical school. They are minority as well. So take a look at them. Look at what they have to go through. Because I think just looking at the numbers is a pretty lazy way to look at it. As a social program director, I remember those days. You're a basic clinician. You're sitting there. You have this pile of papers, and you're reading all these personal statements, and you deciding, okay, who should I take? And then trust me, when you look at the numbers, that's the quickest way to say, oh, I think this person is okay. But that's pretty lazy. That's old way of looking at things, and I think we need to challenge ourselves to start to look at things in totality and holistically, because you may be missing the best of the candidates out there.
I'm sure that resonates with all the people involved in medical school admissions and program directors. It does take more work, but you're more likely to get the candidate you want if you, and I love that distance traveled concept, because you're right. They can, if they've been resilient and problem solved in their life, they can certainly problem solve in medicine. I want to leave. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to add one thing to that, and it's not also problem solving in medicine, but it's also how far will they go for their patients?
Mm-hmm.
They've gone far for themselves; they'll go far for their patient.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I do want to leave a little bit of time, but I want to ask this question before we run out of time. So what would you tell people who are not Black men or even Black women, but are passionate about trying to improve the situation and want to be an ally? What would you suggest for them, both in some big way, but both society or how to contribute to the mentorship and those kinds of programs and pipeline programs? But also, one of the things that's troubling to me about when I read the literature that you've referenced about Black men are more likely to do their preventive health care if a Black physician tells them, and Black women's babies die less if they're taken care of by a Black woman. We can't fix those numbers fast enough. So what would you suggest to clinicians who don't look like either Black men or Black women that they can do to help improve those statistics while we're increasing the numbers? So if you could address those two questions. And Dr. Rob, you want to start?
I'll let Dr. Dale get that started. He's really good at that. How about that, Dr. Dale?
Sure, yeah. I'm about to really good at that part, but sure. So to answer your first question, I'll just keep it quick and simple. The first part, something simple and easy to do is just get out there, and mentor somebody, right? And really, maybe the best thing to do is maybe once a quarter go to a school, and give a presentation, talk, just tell them what you do, right? You don't have to look like the people to have an impact on them, right? So it becomes more of a wow factor, maybe even if you go to a Black school, majority Black school, and they see a white doctor there in a white coat. That might be even more of a wow factor, like, wow, they came here, to our neighborhood, to our school in the white coat. And when you come back the second time, like, wow, they came back the third time, wow, this guy really loves us. They keep on coming back, they want to help us, right? Some of my biggest mentors aren't Black. They don't have to look like you. So, that's just an easy way. I think sometimes we overthink it, like, oh, what do I have to do? Just go, right? Just go to the school. Just email school, ask if you can do a Zoom session for a class, right? Show up and I'm about to show up with a book and just go read to a class, right? Just do something simple like that. It doesn't have to be too complicated. And the second question on the clinical aspect of it, really, all this is rooted in a deep seed of mistrust. Mistrust has been built over centuries, right? So it's something difficult, something hard. So the real question is, how do you gain your patient's trust? And if your patient, and not saying all patients, but if your patients are coming into the situation already with a mistrust of the system, maybe a mistrust of you because you don't look like them, whether it's conscious or subconscious, the only way to gain the trust is to show them, right? And when I say show them, really means you have to take the time, you have to get to know them, you have to do that thing we learned about first couple months of medical school, building rapport, right? You have to do that. And I get it, it's difficult, we're busy, we're going from room to room to room to room, but that's the answer, right? The answer is you have to get this one patient sitting in front of you. It's great, we have all these studies, and the studies are about, population data and things of that sort, and we think like, man, it's so hard, and we're always talking about percentages. Well, let's forget about percentages, and let's talk about one-on-one, me and my patients, right? So I have to figure out, how do I get my patients to trust me in this encounter? So you have to sit down, take the time. One of the things that came out in these studies also that is often overlooked when we talk about these studies is there was I don't remember the numbers or anything, but there was reference to how URM doctors were taking more time with your patients, at the same time, right? So that adds a lot to it. If I go see a doctor, and I don't care what race you are, if I see a doctor and if I'm talking to doctors, they're quiet and 10 of them, they're listening to me, they're nodding, they're engaged with me, I'm gonna feel more comfortable than the doctors rushing in and out the room. And that's not to say that like Black doctors do better. I'm not saying that by any means, right? But what I'm saying is, if you come in a situation disadvantaged because you're race already, so let's say you're a white doctor and you might be disadvantaged, whether it's intentionally or not, because your patient might be Black and your patient might have a mistrust, so you come in a disadvantage. Hey, it's your job to inch back closer and to remove that disadvantage by taking the time to build a rapport with your patients. And that's just the way that's what it has to be. There's no magic wand, no magic bullet, right? You're not gonna, it's either that or a crazy propaganda campaign across all TV platforms to try to, take back all the centuries of mistrust that have been built.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and I'm thinking about the parallels for women. I mean, there's some data about women physicians spending more time with their patients, and the women don't trust. I mean, it's not at the level of Blacks, but the women often don't trust male physicians. So it's a great message that we need to take the time and establish the rapport. I'm going to circle back because there's a question in the Q&A from relative to the training. So you both mentioned we need to accept more diverse trainees, but what about keeping them? And there is data about there's a higher attrition rate for anybody actually that looks different, but particularly for Blacks in training programs. And so what would you say program directors should be thinking about in terms of inclusivity and helping mitigate or navigate their training experiences?
I can take that. I think that's a great question. And I think that's one of the things. Sometimes some of us feel like, yes, you get taken into the program, but there's no support. Still yet, the things that are rooted in the paradigms are still showing. They feel like they're not supported. First of all, there's not many of them. Sometimes that tends to happen. And I think we need to start challenging ourselves and saying, look, this person wants to contribute a fair share to the world. This person wants to contribute a fair share to the society. This person is not circling the foothills. This person is not dejected somewhere in the streets, blaming everybody else. This person wants to make it happen. This person's given to us for free by the universe. You could be mentoring, you could be seeing the next Charles Drew, for instance. You can be seeing the next Patricia Roberts, for instance. So let me mentor this person. I can tell you this, half of my mentors did not look like me. And most of them are really good friends of mine till today. I can call them anytime, and some of them are listening right now. So you ought to understand what's been given to you. This person is here. The universe will not be complete without this person here with you. Mentor him, because that is your obligation. As far as, when it comes to actually accepting residents, I think for the interest of time, I'll be very quick here. I think the fact that we are on a Thursday morning signed on to listen to this means that it's grown interest and there's something we can do better about. So what we need to do is start changing the narrative that when people are in like an environment where a Black male, a minority female, or any other group that doesn't look like us, there may be some discussions that may be to their disadvantage. Discussions like, I saw this kid, he has good scores, but there's something not right about him or her. Each of us should be asking those difficult questions. So, hey, what do you mean by that? Let's be specific. Let's start looking at everyone with the same specific set of lens and give them a chance by starting those conversations in this environment where we can challenge each other. I think that will be the beginning of the change. I want to challenge each one of us that when we are in an environment behind closed doors, when the lights are off and when people start to make comments or assumptions, we are comfortable enough to start saying to them, wait a minute, wait a second, what does that mean? John Doe may not be what you expected, but can you be a little bit more specific? Hopefully, by challenging each other's thinking, we can make better decisions and better selections of these candidates. And also, even when we evaluate them by their residents, we can give them a fair shot. Since it is 9 o'clock Central Time, Dr. Lowry, do you want to conclude this? Or I can conclude it, if you will.
Well, I don't need to conclude it. What I'd like to hear from both of you in conclusion, and I know you might have some concluding remarks about coffee and conversation. So maybe we should start with Dr. Dale. Is just, what is your charge to the people listening? What should we lead this conversation and go out and do?
Yeah, so same thing I pretty much say all the time is what Dr. Robert was just saying just now is mentor. Is mentor somebody, and really what I would tell people is I often say mentor somebody that does not look like you. So if one person who doesn't look like you, take them on and mentor them. And if you do that, you're doing more than most people.
And true friendships can come out of this. The truth is like I said, I did not get here by myself. No one can get to this level by themselves. This medical career does not allow anyone to just get there by themselves, right? Because you've never done this before. We are doing something we've never done before. So you need people, you need a village. So what I would say, help people however you can. Many people has helped me when some directly, some indirectly, whom I've never met. Some have vouched for me and spoken for me in ways that I don't even know about. I think the action to help and lift another person, no matter what their backgrounds are, is a really, really powerful has a powerful downstream effect. This person does not have to be a minority person, but you could be mentoring the next Vivian Thomas, right? I mean, you could be mentoring the next Charles Drew, like I mentioned before. You could be mentoring the next LD Brett, the next Charles Littlejohn, and the next Jason Hall. If he's listening, the next Patricia Turner, for instance, to name a few. I think it's possible we can become the country that can reduce health and healthcare disparities. And I think that once we discover it is worth it, it is done. All right. So what a fantastic session, guys. And thanks, Dr. Larry. Thanks, Dr. Dale, for this riveting episode of the Coffee and Conversation, the Scarcity of Black Men in Medicine. I learned a lot. I hope our audience did as well. Everyone can play a part in this movement of increasing Black men in medicine by mentoring a Black student in medicine, or that resident or that fellow that simply needs guidance. You can become their hero. Medical schools should create meaningful pipelines to increase the number of students in medicine. Individually, you can support pipelines available in your area the best you can. There is a direct correlation between parental income and how kids do well on standardized exams. So your contribution to these pipelines will be much more appreciated. It will go a long way to the point where you don't even know the extent it has done. Because I come from one of these pipelines. I had money given to me for SATs and all of that stuff. So that's, you do not know how much you're going to be doing for these kids if you happen to contribute to their efforts. You can even begin to start a non-for-profit or foundation, like I started with David Luke Foundation, and like Dr. Dale with Diverse Medicine Inc. and Black Men and White Codes, to target families and communities to help solve the problems. Let the dean of your medical schools know about this film and the movement. A huge thanks to the production team for putting this webinar together. As mentioned, this programming will be brought to you quarterly. Be on the lookout for the next episode. I am your host. Until next time.
Thank you both for a great conversation. I learned a lot and enjoyed it, and would highly endorse the documentary.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you guys for having me. See you next time.